We're starting a brand new series today called Better Than You Found It. And over the next three times that we gather, our next three services, this is what we're going to be talking about, this idea of leaving something better than you found it. Maya Angelou said this: if you're going to live, leave a legacy, leave behind a legacy, make an impact on the world that can never be erased. And that's really what we're going to look at, is the legacy that we leave in three different areas. There's nothing worse, I think, than when you let somebody borrow something and they tear it up while they're using it. You know, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you've ever experienced that, but you've probably loaned something out. Guys, maybe you've loaned a tool out to somebody. They needed to borrow it. They were doing some work. They asked you for it, and they brought it back. And here's how you know that they broke it while they used it. They send you a text and say, hey, I left it on your porch. I had to run. Right? That's how you just immediately know, oh, something's wrong with it, right? Because they didn't want to meet with you face to face when they brought it back. They didn't leave it better than they found it. My parents just instilled in me, they just drove this rule home, that you leave something better than you find it. If you use something, if you borrow something from somebody, you return it clean, you return it filled up, you return it better than you found it. To this day, I have a difficult time if I go somewhere and stay in a hotel, I clean up the hotel room before I leave. I'm like, we can't leave the towels on the floor, man. What are they going to think of us? You know, like I'm tidying up because I feel like I should leave it better than I found it. That's what this series is really all about. We're going to look at three areas of life where we believe that we would be better off, the people around us would be better off, and most importantly, we think that God's word tells us that we're responsible, if you're a follower of Jesus, to leave these areas better than you found it. And so today we're going to start by looking at our families. Now, this is not a parenting message, although there are aspects of this that certainly do apply if you have kids, maybe even more importantly, but it still applies just in a family situation. This is not specific to men. It's not specific to women. It applies to both. This message is to anyone who is a part of a family. And the beauty of it is that it applies to all families, because families look different. Even in our church, families look different. Some have lots of kids. Some have no kids. Some have kids that you love them all. Some you have kids and you're like, I can take it or leave that one, right? I'm just kidding. Families look different, and here's a secret about families. There is no perfect family, right? There is no perfect family. All families have issues. They have hang-ups. They have problems. All of us in here have that family member. Maybe it's not our immediate, maybe it's extended, but we have that family member that we're just a little embarrassed of. We don't want to go in public, right? And if you're sitting there right now thinking, I can't think of anybody in my family, I've got bad news for you. We all, some of you are just now getting it. Are you saying it's me? Yes, that's what I was saying. We have families that come in all shapes and sizes, all kinds of good in those families, all kinds of problems in those families. But here's what all families have in common that we will always have a part in. There is something always active in our family, no matter what your family looks like. And it can change, it can get better, it can get worse. We want it to get better, that's the desire. All families have a legacy. Your family has a legacy. My family has a legacy. We have a history of how our family lives in this world. We have a legacy. Here's the official definition of legacy: the long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc., that took place in the past or of a person's life. And that's a pretty good definition. I don't disagree with that at all. But we're going to make it a little more focused for our series. Here's the definition we're going to use. You can follow along with this in our app if you have our app on your phone. But here's the definition we're going to use: the long-lasting impact you make on those around you because of your decisions. That's the definition we're going to use for legacy over the next few weeks. And in this definition, there's three key parts about a legacy. And so in this series, we're going to focus on the people around you. We will talk about the people around you that know you, that see you, that interact with you, that come in contact with you in a frequent manner. Your inner circle, we're going to talk about that more than just the people you work with and hang out with, but your family, your close friends, and the influence God has given you over them. We're also going to talk about the decisions that you make. Do things happen to you in life that are completely out of your control? Absolutely, 100%. There are things that will affect your family that you didn't make a decision to cause that. It just happened, and so it affected you. I'm no way downplaying the outside impacts in our lives and in our families. But in a real sense, it's because there are things that happen outside that we don't have any control over that makes the things that we do have control over, it puts more of a premium on our decisions. The ones that we can control that make an impact are even more important. And on top of that, when things happen that we can't control, even when it's something completely out of our control and it happens, it ushers us into a moment where we still do have decisions to make. We have to choose how we respond and how we react. And do our decisions really directly correlate to the legacy that we want to live? But then there's a final piece of leaving a legacy. And the key here is that it's long lasting. You don't leave a legacy by making a decision. You leave a legacy by making many decisions. A legacy is long lasting. It is not a moment in time. It is through many, 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 many decisions that we make. Do we have any runners in the room? Anybody in here that would say, yeah, I'm a runner? A couple of you. God bless you, people. Especially distance runners. You're like, yeah, I run distance. Anybody willing to admit to that? A couple of you crazy people. I've ran distance before in the military and just in training, thought it would be good for them. But if you have been here at all, you know my disdain for running. I just don't enjoy it at all. If you run, I'm proud of you. Way to go. Keep it up. Just don't tell me how wonderful it is, okay? Because I know you're lying to me. Because it's not. It's not wonderful. But here's the thing about distance runners. Do you know what makes a distance runner a distance runner? It's not just that they run, it's how far they run, right? You can run. I would say everyone in here in this room, if I said, hey, we're all going to run as far as you can run, everybody in here could start running. Now, some of you may only get 2 or 3 steps before that hamstring pops, right? But you started. You ran. Now, I could run a little ways, and then I would remember, oh, I don't do this anymore, and I would stop running. We could all run a little bit, but what would make us a distance runner is if we ran a long distance. We have to have the distance. The same thing is true on leaving a legacy. A decision does not create your legacy. It's years of decisions. It's a lifetime of decisions that create your legacy. So that's why the passage we're going to look at today is so encouraging. We're going to be in Psalm 78 today. If you have a Bible, I'd love for you to turn there with me. It'll be on the screens also. But in Psalm 78, there's not a ton of background to this, but there's a little bit. It's written by a man who was a teacher in the nation of Israel, and his name was Asaph. And in your Bible, if you have a hard copy or a digital one, it may say something at the top of Psalm 78 like this. It may say a maskil of Asaph. That just means an instruction, a teaching of Asaph. That's the man's name. And Psalm 78 is one of the longest psalms that we have, and it tells the history of the people of Israel. He is teaching the nation of Israel their history. He's looking back from when they were in Egypt to David as king, and he is giving them a teaching on their history. And in this instruction of Asaph, there's words of wisdom and encouragement to think about the legacy that they are leaving, the legacy that we will leave as a family, the legacy that will shape our family. So let's look in verse 1 and walk through this together. It says this, my people, hear my instruction, listen to the words from my mouth. So this is not Asaph with 1 or 2 people. This is Asaph making a proclamation. He is declaring this to a group, to a nation of Israel. He's making an announcement so that all can hear. And the reason that's the case is because this is such an important thing. This is not a private one-on-one, hey man, you know what I think would be good for you specifically? This is him telling everybody, we all need to pay attention to this. Here's what we need to know going forward. And here's what he tells them in verse 2. I will declare wise sayings. I will speak mysteries from the past, things we have heard and known and that our ancestors have passed down to us. Now, before any of you panic and think, but Michael, he's bringing up the past, and I don't know if you know my past, but there's some issues there. There's some history there. There's some things that I'm not proud of. I would say to you, of course there is. There is in everybody's life. We all have things in our past that we would rather not anyone know, maybe. We'd rather not bring up. We'd rather not be an influence on our legacy because all of us are sinners. We are born sinners, and all of us are generally selfish. Jesus has to work in us. That's part of making all things new, is taking us from being self-centered and selfish and leading us to following Jesus and think about others. We often don't do things God's way. And so he's saying, in spite of that, to the nation of Israel, we're going to talk about the past. Because if you know anything, maybe you don't, but the nation of Israel does not have a squeaky clean past. They've got a pretty horrible past. They are up and down. They are worshiping God. God, you are everything to us. And then they're like, hey, let's melt all our jewelry and make a statue and we'll worship it instead. They're kind of all over the map. Their history is not clean. They had made decisions that would affect their legacy for sure. And you know this is true. This is true of all of us. We have made decisions we're not proud of. Maybe you've made some that are big. Maybe you've made some that are small. Maybe you've made a decision that has lasting consequences. Maybe you've made a decision that's short consequences. But none of us have a perfect past. He is not saying, if you have a perfect past, remember. He is saying, if you have a past. And guess what all of us have? A past. Remember your past. And the beauty of Asaph's saying is that we're going to talk about it. We're going to learn from it. We're going to help those close to us learn from the good in our past and the mistakes in our past. We're going to help them learn from our wins and our losses because our family can grow from the decisions that we've made. Here's what we need to remember. A lesson changes the direction of your life if you learn from it, but it changes the direction of your family if you allow them to learn from it. Like we can all learn from our own decisions, but if you want to change the legacy of your family, you will talk to them about the lessons that you have learned from your decisions to help them learn from it as well. And so as he says, we're going to talk about our past, we're going to talk about our history. I hope that is not a place that pushes you to guilt and remorse about your past, but instead inspires you to a better future. Not just for you, but for your family. Because here's what he says about it. In verse 4, we will not hide them from their children, but will tell a future generation the praiseworthy acts of the Lord, his might, and the wondrous works he has performed. He established a testimony in Jacob and set up a law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children, so that a future generation, children yet to be born, might know. And they were to rise and tell their children. So in this, we have a bit of instruction. Asaph is in essence saying, he is telling Israel, he would tell us, hey, listen, everyone leaves a legacy in your family. That's what he's saying to him. Is you're going to leave a legacy. He would say to us, if he were here today speaking, he would say to you, you are going to leave a legacy in your family, but you also get to choose what kind of legacy you leave. And he's challenging them to leave one that puts them on the right course for generations to come. And then really all he is doing here is telling them something that they have already been told, because Israel as a nation had already been given instructions on how to leave a right legacy, how to leave a good legacy, how to leave a legacy they were proud of. They had already been given some instructions on how to do this. And so he's reminding them about it. He's talking about it again because it's so important. And because we forget things, right? We forget things, don't we? You forget things, I forget things. We forget important things and remember useless things, don't we? My son right now is 10, and he can tell you stats about football players and basketball players and who's on the team. It's insane the amount of knowledge that he knows about players in the NFL right now at 10 years old. And yet, on a daily basis, we have a 30-minute period of trying to remember where he put his shoes. One of those things he uses every single day in his life, and he cannot remember for the life of him where his shoes are. I walked upstairs the other day getting the kids ready for school, and he's usually the first one down, and he's sitting on the end of his bed just staring up at the ceiling. I said, hey, bud, what are you doing? He said, you haven't seen my shoes, have you? I said, no, but they're not on the end of your bed, man, so get up and start looking. And then you can tell me anything, you want to know anything about a Denver Broncos player, he'll let you know what's happening. He can't remember where he put his shoes. And he's not alone. It's easy for us to do, too, as adults, right? A couple years ago, Dell and I were driving to our Fall Family Fun event. That's back when we used to have it at the Folkadal's house. And we're driving in their neighborhood. It's in October. And we're a couple houses down, and she looks over to me and says, "Oh, happy anniversary." Our anniversary was that day, and I had been wondering all day, is she going to remember this? I'm just kidding. I had completely forgotten about our anniversary. That's an important thing. She had forgotten about it. We said happy anniversary and high-fived in the car on the way to Fall Fest. That was our celebration. We forget things, important things. And this is one of them, I think. And Israel needed a reminder. In Psalm 78, they are reminded about leaving a legacy in their families. And they're told that there is a way to leave a legacy that they can be proud of. A legacy that is centered on the goodness and the importance of God. Because that's really a legacy that will last. And we have the benefit today of looking back to see what Asaph was talking about when he talks about leaving a legacy that changes a family. He is pointing them back to, he was reminding them of Deuteronomy chapter 6, where they are given instructions about how to leave a legacy in their family. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to walk through it. It says this in verse 4. "Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words that I'm giving you today are to be on your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. Bind them on a sign on your hand, and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your city gates." So these are the instructions that are given to the nation of Israel about how to leave a legacy in their family. And I want to look at this today with you to give you a plan, to give you a process to help you leave a legacy in your own home that you would be proud of one day. Because we are going to leave a legacy. That's not a question. That's not what we're asking today. Will you leave a legacy or not? You will leave a legacy. Why not be intentional about it? And I also understand that the thought of leaving a legacy, the responsibility to leave something better than we found it when it comes to our family, that can be overwhelming, can't it? That can be daunting. That can almost paralyze us of, I don't want to mess up, so I'm not going to do anything. And so hopefully today, you might be asking, where would I even start? We can look at this, and it gives you a starting place to shape your family to be better than when you found it, and to be a family that honors God, a legacy that honors God. And so we're going to give you a plan, a process. Now, this is not the only way, but it's a start. It's a starting point. It's a first and important step in saying, acknowledging, hey, I want to be intentional about leaving a legacy in my family. I want to be intentional about leaving my family better than I found it. And so here's what I would tell you that leaving a legacy requires of you. This is the starting point. It requires access, it requires repetition, and it requires priority. These are the key words I want you to remember. Maybe you write these down, take a note of these, jot these in your Bible. It requires access, it requires repetition, and it requires priority. And we see each of these in the instructions given in Deuteronomy. We're going to start with access. For us to leave a legacy, a long-lasting impact on our families, we have to begin not with evaluating our family, but with evaluating us. Right? It always starts in us. And so we have to evaluate the access that we have given God to our life. Look what he says in Deuteronomy back in verse 4. "Listen, Israel, the Lord, our God, the Lord is one." He says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words I am giving you today are to be in your heart." So he tells them, love God with your heart, with your soul, with your strength. He means this. This is what he's saying to him. Listen, there is not a part of your life that you should hold back from God. You shouldn't give him some of your life, but not all of your life. You shouldn't give him most of your life, but not all of your life. You shouldn't give him some things, but not everything. Who you are, everything about you, the emotions that drive you, how you go about your day, God should have access to all of those things. Here's what he's ultimately saying. There should not be a church you and a work you. Right? There should not be a religious you and a regular you. There should not be a community group you and a golf you. There should not be a Jesus follower you and a going out you. He's saying every part of your life should be open and God should have access to it. There should not be two yous. You should invite God into each part of your life so that he changes who you are first, who I am first. And it's out of that our impact on our legacy in our family will change. if you want to begin to impact your family for a long, long time, it doesn't begin with them and what they're doing and how you can change or fix or redirect them. It begins in you, opening all of you up to God. And then after that, after you have done that, it begins to overflow out of you into your family. And one of the best ways this happens is through repetition. Verse 7 says, repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. He's saying the things that God has taught us, we should talk about them often. We should repeat them all the time. It should constantly be on our minds and coming out of our mouth. How many of you here this morning would say, you know what I loved in school? I loved math. We got any math people in here? Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, that's good. I love math when I was a kid until they stopped using flashcards. Once it got past flashcards, it was kind of out of my ballpark. I almost brought some flashcards. My kids are using flashcards, my younger ones right now, to do multiplication. And man, I loved it. The reason I loved it was because of the competition, not because of the math. Because I wanted to be able to say, I'm better at this than you. Once we got past that, I didn't really care. I almost brought some flashcards today just to test the room and see which side was faster at multiplication. But I didn't want any fights to break out. I also didn't want you to be embarrassed that it's been a while since you've done multiplication. But I will sit at the table with my kids and I'll do flashcards. Multiplication, the 6 table, the 7 table, the 8 table, you know. And they have all said to me, Dad, they'll sit there, they'll start thinking about it. I'll say 6 times 6, and they think about it. And I tell them, I don't need you to think about this. I need you to know this. And they will say, well, I've got to tell them how I came up with 36. And I say, no, you don't. I just need you to know what is true. 6 times 6 is 36. I don't need you to be able to explain it right now. Now, if you're a teacher in here and you're shaking your head at me, I get it. I know you hate me for that. But that's how it rolls in my house, all right? We're just going to memorize it first. We'll get it later. And so I tell them, just learn this. Just memorize this. Just commit this to memory. 6 times 6 is 36. You don't actually have to do any math at all. Just memorize it. In fact, our kids come home today and they do the multiplication with me, and they do it quickly now because they have memorized it. One day, we'll get there. They will learn it. But right now, I need them to know it in their head and then allow it to work its way into their heart. The writer is saying here, I don't want you to waste your time. You have a limited amount of time with your family, a limited amount of time around your family. Don't waste it. Use opportunities to talk about God, His goodness, His provision, His love, His justice, His righteousness, what it means to follow Him. Everywhere you go, there is something happening around you that you can use to talk about this. He's not saying be a weirdo, okay? Don't hear me say that. He's just saying talk about Jesus. Talk about God in your family a lot. Use opportunities to show them that God is at work. And so after you've given access to God, and then you just use opportunities that are daily in your life to repeat, to have repetition, talking about God. Then he introduces the last piece. In verse 8, he says, bind God's instructions as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your city gates. This is where God is saying, you need to make them a priority. You need to make God a priority. You need to make what He is teaching a priority. God needs to be at the center of your family. We have now moved from just transfer of knowledge into living this out, into this affecting your heart. When we make Him a priority, that is when we move the information from someone's head to their heart. And he says, make the words a symbol, a doorpost, put them on your doorpost, put them on your city gates. That's a word picture there. He's saying, wherever the place is that you go in and out of the most, the place that is the most prominent, the place that you will see often, this is where you show that they are a priority. And here's why he says this is because you should never expect God to be more important to your family than He is to you. Right? I've heard so many, it's usually men who say this, man, I hope my kids don't grow up to be like me. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to grow up to be like you, because hope's not a strategy. Guys, especially I'm speaking to you. if you want your family to have a lasting impact, a lasting legacy, you need to get serious about your relationship with God. Because we are a fool to think that I can be lazy about it and make it be an add-on to my life, but my kids will approach it differently. If you want your kids, if you want your spouse, if you want your extended family to make God a priority in their life, it has to begin with you. We all have priorities in life. I don't know what yours are. I could guess, because I think this is something we all struggle with. And the reason we struggle with it is because we're taught so often this is how life looks. You go to school, and then you go to college or to a trade, and you work really hard, and you build up for yourself a little nest egg so that you can retire well. That's what we're told. That's what we are taught about the priorities in life. Everything in our life should be prioritized around that. Being able to retire, that's the goal. If you come to my funeral and somebody says about me, he retired well, please shoot me, okay? What a wasted life. What would your family look like if your number one priority, before everything else, before success, before wealth, before influence, before fame, before everything, what if your top priority was to daily, completely surrender your life to God? I don't think we can fully comprehend the change in the legacy of our family. I mean, what if that directed how we operate every day? What kind of legacy would we leave? What kind of impact would we make on our family? If we truly want to leave a legacy that shifts our family to God being the center and living our life God's way, we have to make him a priority. But here's the challenge: leaving our family better than we found it. It's a commitment and it's a process. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not a habit to do for the next few days. This takes time. This takes energy. This will take sacrifice. This will take intentionality. By giving God access to all of us, by talking about him, repetition, by thinking about him in all areas and surrendering to God, making him our top priority, it positions us in a place of changing the legacy in our family. But we have to do this over and over and over and over and over again. And here's why we do this. He tells us back in Psalm 78, Asaph says, here's why we do this. This is so important. So that they might put their what? Confidence in God and not forget God's works, but keep his commands. I'm so tired of young people hitting 20, 25 and leaving the faith. You know why they do that? Because they don't have confidence in God. And you know why they don't have confidence in God? Because they've never seen us have confidence in God. They've seen us attend church. And attending church doesn't change anybody's life. Surrendering your life to Jesus changes your life. Making him a priority changes your life. And listen, moms and dads, when your boys and girls see you devoted to God, it will keep them from running from him. They'll see God working in your life, and they'll want that in their life. They put their confidence in something greater than themselves. You want your family to not turn from God, then we would have to look and see how important God is from you, both in the good and in the bad. We want our families, our extended family, our immediate family to choose to do what is right, even when it's hard. We want them to choose integrity. We want them to choose to align with how God has said for us to live. We have to model it for them and teach them why we're doing this. Because here's the thing. We all hope our family turns out great, don't we? Nobody's in here saying, you know what, I hope in 30 years it's a train wreck. Nobody's saying that. We all hope that our family turns out great. But like I said a moment ago, hope is not a strategy for your family's direction. Asaph is saying, no, what if we were intentional on how we left our family better than we found it? And here's why. Because it's too big of a chance to leave your family up to chance. if you're not making a plan for it, if you're not thinking about how you're going to leave a legacy that points your family towards God, you're just leaving it up to chance. And wouldn't you say that your family is too important to you to just leave it up to chance? What if we determined to set a course for our family, to be intentional about the legacy that we leave and that our family leaves? And maybe for you, making that decision today is all your family needs to be changed for generations to come. I don't know what your family is going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years. But maybe making that decision today is the course correction. It is the shift in direction for the legacy of your family. Maybe doing that today, you can leave your family better than you found it. Let me leave you a couple questions to think about over lunch. Here's the first one. What do you want to be true about your family? We probably all have some things that pop into our mind right now, but I would encourage you this afternoon, maybe with your spouse, if you've got kids, maybe with your kids, what are some things, maybe it's a list of a few things that you want to be true about your family. Most of the time, the things we want to be true about our family are not accidentally going to happen. If you want your legacy to be this, whatever that is, you need to be intentional about it, which leads to the next question. What's one way you can leave your family better than you found it? Listen, it's a process. There's lots of areas that we need to grow in and work on, but what's one next step that you can take for your family being centered around God and leaving a legacy that you would be proud of? You've got to start somewhere because you're going to leave a legacy. It's going to happen. Why not choose the legacy you leave? Let's pray together. God, thank you for our time together today. We thank you for the lesson that we see in Psalm here about leaving a legacy. God, we are reminded in this that our history impacts us, but that you are a gracious God. You're a God that forgives and loves, and you use our history to shape us and mold us and guide us, and you redeem it. We don't redeem it. You redeem our past. And so, God, we just ask that we would embrace that truth as we think about our future and the legacy that we want to leave in our families. And I pray that our church would be a church that impacts our families well, that points them to God, that puts you at the center, that makes you the top priority in our homes and in our families, God, so that when we are dead and gone and the next generation of our families are around, they are better than when we were here because we put them on the right course of having God at the center. God, help us to be intentional about this. It's in your name we pray. Amen.